Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another episode in the wootsmithing tradition series. In the last video, we talked about the Jajmani payment system or brokering system. If you haven't watched that, I would definitely recommend watching that first before you watch this video, because this video is kind of a continuation from that. In today's video, we're going to talk about quality control and kind of the continuation of the martial tradition of wootsmiths, so the Shastra Vidya, or the martial traditions, the science of weaponry. So I want to start with kind of transporting us to the 17th century, or 1700s, 1800s. So we kind of transport you guys there for this video. And imagine we have no access to science, scientific labs. We don't have any HRC testing machines or Vickers hardness machines. We don't have any elemental analysis. We don't have any microscopes or anything like that. So you just have traditional methods to forge wood steel right into weapons. But they managed to make amazing weapons. We have thousands upon thousands of examples of Wootz blades being of the highest quality, performance, edge, elasticity, patterning, watering, all those different things, right? So how do they do it? How do they maintain that level of quality control? So before I go into that, I just want to mention that if a wootsmith back in 1800s, if they were making poor quality blades or poor quality steel, their reputation would be heavily damaged. It would be heavily impacted, so much so that people would stop ordering from them. So if you screwed up, there was flaws in your steel, flaws in your quality of your blade, you had catastrophic failures in your steel, in your blade, in your sword, people would know about it. And if a warrior survived or didn't survive, I'm sure the warriors, brothers in arms, would know about it. And that's all they talked about, right? They would talk about who made your blade and where was it commissioned and when did you get it made and what's the quality of it, can I have a look at it? So another important thing to mention is warriors, people who commissioned the blades, didn't have the metallurgical or the smithing knowledge that the wootsmiths had. Obviously, because obviously if they did, they wouldn't be going to a wootsmith, right? And so they were reliant on the wootsmith's knowledge, right? So if it was a life and death situation for them, because if you made a sword that was of poor quality, it would be a matter of life or death for that particular user, right? For the warrior. So the warrior came with the hope and kind of prayers that you make the best sword possible to protect his life and to be able to destroy his enemies. And most warriors, just like now with martial artists, to be fair, a lot of Eastern martial artists, they don't have a lot of knowledge around steel or forging of wood steel. I remember speaking to a Eastern martial artist who showed me an antique talwar, and he was saying it's a great blade, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that it was very, very poor quality Wootz blade. And that was the same back in ancient times as well, that a lot of people who were using the blades didn't actually know how good these blades were, because the smiths only knew what was involved in that particular blade. So there was a level of reliance on these particular smiths, and it wasn't that the smiths could just steal, fib their way and say, yeah, this is a great sword, buy it from me. Because if they could get away with it technically, but you would be found out very, very soon, right? Once that blade fails, or eventually one blade fails. And like I said, we're talking about life or death here. We're talking about combat situations. We're talking about tools made for war. So we know now the reputational risk on a wootsmith, and also on the judgman, the person who might be brokering the deal. So if you do something, if you have poor quality, it's also going to affect the person who recommended you as well. So we know that. So it was in the interests of the wootsmith to make sure that your quality and your standards were extremely high. You had very little room for error. So this is where the difference between a blacksmith and a wootsmith is, that a blacksmith didn't have these issues to deal with. There was a lot of pressure on a wootsmith that you're making a weapon, a tool of war, whereas a blacksmith might be most likely making a tool for agriculture. So the levels of failure, the kind of rates, the acceptable failure rates were a lot lower, or almost zero on weaponry, right? So we've got this situation now. We're wootsmithing back in ancient times. So how did they do quality control? How did they ensure quality? And quality control was broken down through stages. And I'm going to walk you through those stages now. The first stage started from ingot stage. So regardless of if you made the ingot, bought the ingot, given the ingot, it doesn't matter. You would categorize and break and sort those ingots into categories. The categories would be based on a combination of weight, size, even shape, structure of the raw structure of the ingot. So they would grind the structure and etch it to see what the structure is. They would do spark testing. They would check for inclusions. They would check for graphitization, inclusion, slag, porosity, all those different things. Based on that, they would sort them into categories, and the sorting would be done based on historical knowledge. And this is the bit that a lot of people don't understand, especially the historical sword collectors or the everyday sword collector. They don't understand that the quality control was actually intergenerational. You have to understand that these smiths were generational smiths. So they were like father to son knowledge, or master to apprentice. There were families who were doing these things for 5, 6, 7, 8 generations, right? So there were several hundred years of knowledge through trial and error probably, but there was several hundred years of knowledge through these smithing communities, through these smithing families, about how to smith woots, and they would have that knowledge. So they would also, so just to go back on the ingot knowledge, they would know where the ingot came from, who made the ingot, when the ingot was made, what materials were used to make the ingot, and if the supply of that ingot was even trustworthy. You know, not every wootsmith made their own steel. It's very, very important to understand that. So with all that information, you would sort the ingots out, and that would be your first stage of quality control. Next stage would be obviously the forging, processing the steel. They would do everything very gently, see how the steel reacted, but they would have a bit of an idea because they've seen these structures, they've seen this kind of feeling of, they've had these kind of ingots before. And they would forge these ingots out into billets, and then they would, if there were any issues with the processing of that billet, processing of that steel into a billet, they would deal with it there and then. So you wouldn't leave issues just to fester. You would, if there was an inclusion, you would fix it straight away. If there was a crack, you would get rid of it straight away, right? The quality would, you know, you would maintain the quality of that steel as best as you possibly can. Another aspect of quality control was the actual operational side. So we're talking about discipline, focus, attention, fuel management, forge management. You're talking about the apprentice and the master smith, making sure the communication is clear. It was almost like a religious ceremony. It was very, very spiritual, very, very religious, and it was there was a huge amount of attention to detail through the forging process. I want you to imagine that, you know, this block of Wootz steel would have costed a lot of money. If you failed, if you destroyed it, you know, you've lost an order, and salvaging that steel might be extremely difficult. So you would have lost a huge amount of money. So we've got this quality control through the forging process. As we start moving to shaping that into, let's say for argument's sake, a shamshir, right? We're forging this into a shamshir, and we're shaping it, and we're constantly looking at the specifications. We're monitoring and we're maintaining a very high level of discipline to make that particular weapon. And then we go to the any issues, we resolve them there and then. We polish, and we like to look at the actual watering of the blade. It's very, very important to make sure I share this, that the watering is not just about the patterning. It's not just like, oh, it's amazing pattern, right? It's the watering actually tells you a story. So if a blade was made by an apprentice, if that was polished and etched, a master smith should be able to look at that blade and understand how it was forged, how it was heat treated, how it was polished and ground, and even to a certain degree temperature forging as well. So there's a huge amount of knowledge within the actual pattern that really the wootsmiths would be monitoring constantly throughout the forging process. So the latter stage would be around the finishing and balancing stage, and this is the bit which is associated to the knowledge of weaponry, of Shastra Vidya, or the science of weaponry or science of warfare. And this is why the wootsmiths were trained and active in weaponry and swordsmanship, because what they were making, they would have to check the balance and the usability of. So I'll try and put a clip here of me testing a blade that I'm currently working on. So what you saw me doing in that video clip there was I'm swinging a sword around, and to the untrained eye it might look like I'm just practicing with a sword and I'm not doing anything more than that. But what I'm actually doing there is I'm actually giving the sword instructions, and I'm trying to feel how it responds to my instructions. Back in ancient times, when a wootsmith would make a sword, this would be kind of almost the last stage of quality control. So I'm not going to talk about the kind of finishing as in the sense of the beautification of the sword and the polishing and the scratches and little things like that. I'm not talking about that quality control. I don't think that's important for this video. What I'm doing in that particular clip is I'm giving the sword instructions, and I'm trying to feel how it responds to my instructions. There's a big misconception with some swordsmen around that there's a balance. There's a balance from tip to handle, but in my tradition, in the tradition I come from, there's a balance that on Indo-Persian swords, so like the shamshirs and the talwars, that there's a balance left to right as well, because the blades are very, very curved, especially shamshirs, and there's a significant amount of metal on that last quarter as well. So when I'm what I'm doing in that particular clip is I'm giving the sword instructions, I'm feeling how the sword is responding, I'm taking note of that and making adjustments to the blade or making adjustments to the handle. That could be recontouring, repolishing, thinning down, adding weight on the handle, maybe adding more sword adhesive to the guard or to the pommel cap, or adjusting these things. It is extremely important that the balance of that sword is set to specification or is set to the traditions of that particular sword. So that's what I'm doing in that particular video. Hopefully that makes sense. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I don't want to go too much into the detail of finishing Wootz on the kind of the beautification of Wootz. I don't think that really matters too much. If it does, then please message and comment, and I'll make another video. Maharaj Kirpa Kare, God willing, I can try and make those videos as well. But hopefully this makes sense. And if you have any questions, please, like I said, comment them down in the comments. Please like and subscribe and share. And I'll see you in the next one. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.